Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahowah Radio. It's good to be back with you. I apologize in advance if I cough here and there during the program. Still have some of the lingering symptoms of having contracted COVID for a second time. I'm a lucky winner. I'm not unique in this regard. I think when I came down with Omicron, the numbers were such that the majority of people worldwide actually contracted Omicron. Not that many were tested. About the time of Omicron, most people realized there's no purpose to the test. You're not going to the hospital with it. There is no reason to pay the money and face the aggravation of it. So most people weren't tested. Now, lots of people are tested, so you know. For example, I took a test here, but we take home tests and we don't report the home test to anybody. We just it's a way of knowing. But right now, the numbers on COVID, just to put this in perspective, are 5 to 6 times higher in terms of the infection rates than they were back 2 years ago when all the news was COVID 24/7 and the COVID counts, the death counts, the liberal governors trying to oppress the people, yes, so that people were told they couldn't work, they couldn't socialize. We kept on saying this is going to backfire, that the negative consequence on mental health, on sexual abuse, on drug abuse, on suicide, psychiatric problems, and also the devastation that will be wrought to the economy will be unmitigated, so much worse than the virus ever could have been. And we said all of that as the news was first being reported, and it turned out to be exactly that way. Now there's very little news on COVID because, well, quite frankly, everything that the government did turned out to be counterproductive. So the onslaught of this disease wrought in the Chinese Viral Institute in Hunan continues to take its toll on the world. As I said, I had another rough week because of it. There really there's no way to avoid it anymore. In fact, on just my little remodeling crew here, we had 5 individuals that came down with it all on the same day. So it is it's a tragic thing. Speaking of tragic, the war in Ukraine continues to beat on. I continue to be sickened every time I hear the United States sends more weapons there. Sickened that the Ukrainians are screaming bloody murder. He's killing civilians, war crimes. What the hell do you think was going to happen when we purposefully taunted Russia and gave them no choice but to invade, and then decided to turn the Ukraine into our proxy so we could go play war against Russia? What do you think was going to happen when we gave the Ukraine hundreds of billions of dollars worth of sophisticated U.S. weapons so that they could sink Russian ships, so that they could send rockets into to Russian encampments, so that they would have anti-tank rounds for their cities? Do you think that at that point that the Russians are going to go in with a surgical strike and try to take large cities by sending men on foot and in vehicles? Or do you think they're just going to bombard them from afar to protect their own from the retribution of Americans' weapons? It was so obvious as to what was going to occur. And there's no backing down. You could sanction them till the cows come home. And they're not leaving. Putin even said this past week, we've only begun. This is nonsense. And I just want to remind people, because there's just so little sanity here, that back at the time of Obama, that administration sanctioned through the U.S. State Department and the CIA a revolution in Ukraine deliberately to overthrow the pro-Russian government. And the Ukraine is an interesting entity because the pipeline from the Caspian Sea oil and gas reserves that are so essential to the Russian economy. Sending natural gas to Europe was built through the Ukraine at the time the Ukraine was a Soviet republic. And so it is of vital interest to Russia. And when the Ukraine decided they didn't want to be part of Russia, they still maintained excellent relations until the United States meddled. And the meddling took place at a time where there was this great debate as to who was going to fund the bankrupt country. The Ukraine had a horrible track record of being in desperate need of international monetary handouts and then not honoring their debt. And the International Monetary Fund had loaned them billions not to be repaid. The Soviets, not the Soviets, but the Russians loaned them billions more. The Russians were more clever because of the pipeline that went through the Ukraine. They had a means to getting repaid. But the United States decided, nope, we want Ukraine to be dependent upon the IMF. We want to pull it away from the Russian sphere of influence. And so we conducted the revolution that relied heavily on the neo-Nazis, and we armed it and overthrew the popularly elected government, and then told ourselves how wonderful we were for supporting democracy. At that time, unbeknownst to me then, but and I reported heavily on that on the revolution at the time it occurred, and I said this is specifically being done for international financing reasons, and that it is being done to put Ukraine under the influence of NATO and Europe, pulling it away from Russian influence, and that it will backfire. And that was back in 2013 during the radio shows that I did on that subject, many hours of them. What I did not know at the time is that Lindsey Graham and John McCain, probably the two highest-ranking Republican senators, immediately thereafter flew to Ukraine and told the Ukrainians that we would be in this war with them, that their war would be our war. We would fight to win, and we would give them all of the weapons necessary for them to prevail. War. Their war is our war. We'll arm them without restriction so that we're sure of winning. That means that the revolution that we sponsored to usurp the democratically elected government and replace it with one of our choosing was specifically designed to engage in a war with Russia. And here we find ourselves less than a decade later at war with Russia. And the economy we had already devastated through our grotesque overreach on COVID was then further devastated with the sanctions imposed on Russia, not recognizing that they are a leading source of oil, natural gas, fertilizers, wheat, and many other things that the world depends on, sending inflation skyrocketing. It's now at 10% and continuing to roar at a time that supply lines are devastated and where even mobility is difficult because after COVID, there's far too few pilots even to fly aircraft. We're in a mess. And we're in a mess because we did this deliberately. Millions of people are going to die in the first phase of this war because we wanted war. And ultimately, when this war became too costly to fight in its second phase, its first phase was more strategic. We'll go into the cities with a show of force. That did not work because of the weapons America supplied. The second phase is just bombardment, artillery, rockets, which are more indiscriminate killers. Third phase, and they're just destroying Ukraine. The third phase will be nuclear. And we brought to this on ourselves. Incredibly sad. I don't know if you read the news on this, but in Poland, it was just revealed that there are bodies. I think it's in the range of 10,000 people that victims were of a genocide in one of the concentration camps, where the Germans wanted to hide their atrocities. So they took the ashes of whether it was 10,000 or 20,000 people, and then they reburied them in an unmarked trough, only to have it discovered here quite recently. Extraordinarily sad. And what's amazing here,
Yes.
speaking of Ukraine, this particular headline reads, Warsaw, Poland. Poland's leaders marked the anniversary of World War II era's Ukrainian massacre of Poles Monday. Ukrainian massacre of Poles.
Mm-hmm.
By stressing that only the full truth will bring an end to this kind of violence. He said during the observance of the memory of the victims of genocide that this is the best time to condemn the murder of Polish citizens. So not only do we have the realization that Ukrainians who loved the Nazis were worse in terms of their genocidal attacks on Jews than any people anywhere in the world. And that includes Muslims, it includes Orthodox Christians, it includes Nazis. Per capita, there was no place where Jews fared worse than they did in the Ukraine, but that the Ukrainians went out of the Ukraine and savaged Polish citizens as well. These are not people that we should be helping. The other thing that is really interesting that came up in the news again is the dramatic rise in conspiracy theories across America. You know, there is a huge percentage of Americans that don't even believe that COVID exists as a virus. Okay.
Need a break.
Tell my lungs
don't
that,
laugh.
please.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. There are others that believe that January 6th was an insurrection. Listen, I don't care what pictures you look at of January 6th. If you look at any group shot, what you have is a picture of lots of middle-aged people taking selfies. Most were equipped with nothing more than a cell phone. Yeah, so 3% were belligerent. But put the ones that were belligerent in jail. But the overwhelming preponderance of those people were there on a misguided political rally, which was caused by a conspiracy, and that would be the conspiracies of the former president, Trump. It is also interesting that Trump got into a pissing contest here with Elon Musk.
Elon?
He called Elon Musk, a fraud, a guy that is nothing but a blowhard that doesn't really accomplish anything. Now, I'm here to tell you that if you were to list the most accomplished businessmen, the most accomplished men in American history, Elon Musk would be very high on that list. I'm not certain that you would find a rival for Elon Musk. Here's a guy that in the midst of the world's craving for electric cars creates the largest electric car company in the world, by far larger than any other. At the same time, just in his spare time, as a hobby, he creates what is a vastly superior space exploration capability with rockets and capsules and satellites. And then, just for giggles, he comes up with a way of linking the world together via internet, no matter where you are, with tens of thousands of low-orbiting satellites. And then, just for fun, he creates the world's largest battery manufacturing company because batteries are essential to solar energy. No matter what you think about the guy, I mean, just in his pastime, he decided that he would go and buy Twitter with the hope of keeping it free in the midst of where the social media tycoons are all trying to impose their thought police. It is stunning what Elon Musk has done, and then for Trump to take him and to pin this idea as he's a blowhard hasn't accomplished anything. Well, Elon Musk came back and said, well, perhaps it's time to put the Trumpster to bed. I was looking at another article here recently. We're looking at talking about the Ukraine. The Ukraine bellyached some months ago that the Russians should be brought up for war crimes because they deliberately shelled a nursing home. Well, the UN is now reporting that the reason they shelled the nursing home is that it was a barracks Ukrainian troops, and perhaps they bear the blame for the attack. Truth is the first casualty of war.
Yes.
It is. There is no question that is our reality. Yep. So Trump and Elon Musk are at it. He says, "I don't hate the man, but it's time for Trump to hang up his hat and sail into the sunset." Oh, that'll certainly upset a whole lot of people. I think that one of his pet projects, I think Elon Musk even invented PayPal, if I'm not mistaken. The guy has certainly been extraordinary. One of the things that is just a funky thing to me, you probably follow golf, Kirk, and you know that there's a new golf league called Live Golf. And Greg Norman, who I know, is the founder of Live Golf, and he is using the Saudi funds to have very large payouts for the players that play Live Golf. And the PGA Tour is having a conniption fit because, well, it's competition. And the PGA Tour doesn't want to have to compete, so the PGA Tour is doing everything it can, forming new relationships with the European Tour, and now trying to bribe players within its own tour to stay with it, and threats and all this sort of thing. And I've always been an open, freedom sort of a guy. You should, independent contractors should be able to play wherever they want to play or work wherever they want to work, and so I'm always in favor of that. And of course, the big thing about this tour is, it's blood money. They killed Khashoggi, and so with them killing Khashoggi, it's blood money. They ought not be paid with that money. And my view is I don't think there's anybody that's more anti-Islam than I am, or anti-Saudi Arabia than I am. I'm here to tell you that Joe Biden going to Saudi Arabia to fist pump Mohammed and cut deals with him in back rooms is
begging for oil, please. Yeah.
The United States sending Saudi Arabia hundreds of billions of dollars for our most advanced weapons is infinitely worse. And I'm here to tell you that when you go into the gas station and you fill up your SUV with gasoline, you sending money indirectly to the Sauds for supplying that gas is much worse than spending their money. If the Sauds want to spend the money beautifying downtown Frederickstead, where I live, let them do it. Let them do it. Yeah. If Frederickstead says, what I want to do is I want to send a bunch of tanks and fighter planes to Saudi Arabia, it's pretty much a bad idea. But I just don't get it why there's such a conniption fit over people's inability to compete and how they can't view anything in context. Well, you finished a chapter last week in my absence. Thank you, indeed, for doing so. I understand that you all were promoting. Let's see, where did Miss D say that we were last week? With some pretty decent. Egypt, and I think we're back in Egypt again this week. The reasonable Jewish community still in Egypt that have never left over the long period of time. So we are returning to what now is chapter 12 of volume 7 of Yada Yahowah. It's called Shana. It goes through the years, and it demarks time by talking about prophecies, many of which have been misconstrued and misapplied, and many of which are very telling in terms of the timeline that Yah has established for us. This particular chapter was named Ein Ish. It translates as no one. I am currently, and I shared this with you before we began the program, translating Hosha. It's the 8th volume of Yada Yahowah, and about halfway through the volume at this point. And the thing that I've come to realize is you can't read any prophet where there isn't some direct or indirect mention of what we're doing. So as we go through this first prophecy that is misappropriated by Twistians, where they think that it speaks of their Jesus, I'm here to tell you that there are a number of themes that are prevalent throughout the Torah and prophets and Psalms. And one of those is that Jews became so religious that God disassociated from them. He disinherited them. He divorced himself from Israel. And he did so strictly because he could not tolerate their religiosity. Judaism is the problem between Yahweh and Yehuda. That is the number one most reoccurring prophecy throughout the Yahweh's witness. There is none that even comes close to it. But there is another reoccurring theme, which is that because Jews became religious, they stopped listening to him. They actually became hostile towards him to the point that there was no one for him to communicate with.
Yeah.
And that the last Israelite prophet was Hosea, around 750-ish BCE. And the last Yehud prophet was Malachi, around 450 BCE. It hadn't been one since.
No.
That's a long time to look and find no one. And so God continues to remind his people that he made a promise that he's going to honor. He is going to return, and he's going to reconcile his relationship with Yisrael and Yehudim. And when he does so, he is going to do this in spite of this long intermission, but that the method that he is going to use is going to be very startling to them, which is that he is going to deploy a goy. And he's going to deploy a goy not because that's his preference, but because there's no alternative. And the only way to get Israelites and Yehudim to listen in the end was to work through a Gentile. That's not what Jews want to hear. They don't want to hear that the worst among them are the rabbis. They don't want to hear that Judaism is the greatest obstacle between them and God. But nonetheless, this is what God says, and he doesn't say it quietly. He doesn't say it infrequently. It is the most reoccurring and most blunt theme throughout the Torah and prophets.
Amazingly so, yes.
So beyond the prophecies that we've already considered in this volume, there are two additional prophecies in Yashayahu. That's Isaiah. that are commonly misappropriated by Christians. And it's important for Yah's people, Jews, to understand what Christians have done, prophecies that he provided regarding them as the audience. Because it's only when you know the essence of replacement theology and how everything that was said for the benefit of Yehudim being taken and misappropriated for the benefit of giving credibility to a religion that otherwise has none, has done some things to Jews that is essential for them to know. And one of them is, for example, when Christians misappropriated Yosha, renamed him Jesus, and then claimed that he died for their sins, that he was the Son of God and the Messiah, and named their religion after the notion that he was Christ the Messiah, they caused Jews to rebel viciously against him. And in doing so, they were right in recognizing that his name wasn't Jesus. They were right in recognizing he wasn't the Messiah. They were right in recognizing that he was not the Son of God. But by vehemently opposing him on those grounds, they failed to recognize that he was the Passover lamb.
Passover lamb, yeah.
And if you forego the fulfillment of Pesach, there is no hope of eternal life. And if you don't recognize that Yahweh fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bokurim, and Shabuah in your 4,000 Yah, there is no way to be part of the covenant. And if you don't recognize that the first 3 days fall under the umbrella of Chag Matzah, and the central part of that is the removal of yeast, which is the fungus of religion, from our souls, so that once immortalized, we can be perfected and enter Yahweh's home as part of his family on Bokurim, so that he can empower and enrich our lives on Shabuah, then you're left with nothing but a deadly religion. And that's what the rabbis have done. The rabbis literally created rabbinic Judaism out of their desire to deny the claims of Christianity. And of course, Christianity was created out of the misappropriation of the role Yosha played as the Passover lamb, turning the Passover lamb into God. So understanding how these things have been misappropriated and being able to counteract them, and therefore not robbing yourself of the essential truth that is there, is essential to the recovery and reconciliation of Yehudim, Jews, with Yahweh. I think that our understanding of the mistakes of replacement theology, even though our audience is Jews, not Gentiles, principally, is vital. And we need to delegitimize the religion that has historically been the most anti-Semitic, in part to reestablish Dod's standing with Yahweh and to appreciate Dod's role in his prophetic plans. If you do not understand Dod's role, then you can't understand God's timeline. And the reason I say this is with Christianity's craving for legitimacy, since there is not a single prophecy that mentions Jesus. There isn't a single prophecy that mentions the arrival of a Messiah. Well, not one, not one in 2,000 years ago. There is none that even speak of Yosha, his correct name. Yeah. So for him to be the be-all, end-all, and to be the founder of a religion, as Christians have been led to believe, the Son of God and the Messiah and these sorts of things,
Yeah, King of Kings. I don't know.
With tens of thousands of prophecies of what God's going to do, why isn't there one prophecy that speaks of him? There isn't. So what they've done is they've taken prophecies that speak of others, particularly Dode, and they say, oh, yeah, well, God, we don't know what his name is, so chances are he doesn't know what anybody else's name is, and therefore when he speaks of Dode, who we call David, he's really speaking of Jesus, who doesn't exist at all.
Who doesn't exist at all? No.
But that's our story, and we're sticking with it. All right, so one of the prophecies that they take is Yeshaya 11. Yeshaya 11 does not speak of Yosha or Jesus. It begins with a title that is appropriate to apply to a vastly less important implement than the Passover lamb. The term is choder, a sprout, a sucker. And a sucker happens to be the perfect term, partly because it's funny, because we use sucker as a pejorative to say, he's a real sucker. But sucker for punishment, all that sort of thing. But, Yahweh loves horticultural terms. Choder is a horticultural term. It's a type of a shoot that, in essence, comes up from the rootstock of a fallen tree. So with the olive tree being symbolic of the life of Yisrael, the olive tree being symbolic of the witness of the end times witnesses, Elia being one of them. It speaks specifically in Zechariah of two olive trees. The olive tree, of course, is the source of olive oil, which is symbolic of the Spirit and of Yahweh's enlightenment. Is the longest-lived tree in Israel. It is deeply rooted, and oil is used for anointing. The olive is exceedingly important, but the olive tree that was vital and productive in Yisrael has long since fallen. But God has not given up on that tree. So for it to be fruitful again, he has arranged for a sucker. That is a shoot that comes up from the original rootstock. Now, I can tell you that Yosha, being infused with Yahweh's consciousness, his nefesh, to serve as the Pesach El, the Passover lamb, was not a sucker. That's just way beneath his role.
Yes.
Now, he's not equal to Dode. Dode is the top guy. He's not equal to Moshe. But third to Moshe and Dode, and that's pretty tall company, that's where Yosha fits in the hierarchy of things. And you're not going to call Moshe or Dode a sucker, but that's the term. Then a choder, a shoot or sucker from a fallen stump, a stem or secondary branch, a slender twig or stick, a pliable wooden instrument, a secondary source of growth, serving as a living entity delivering prodigy, as an observant individual who is willing to listen and who is committed to thinking while collecting the things Yahweh values, as an unrestrained extension. Will be extended for a limited time. Yatsa. Yatsa is an essential term. So we have choder, sucker. The first verb is yatsa. Will be extended. What is the purpose of this extension? It's to withdraw Yahweh's people from Babylon. Religious and political and geographic Babylon. Political, the United States. Religious, Christianity, particularly Roman Catholicism, and geographic throughout the Middle East where they have been scattered. Yatsa is the operative term of the Exodus. We are headed for a second Exodus. The first was from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression. The second is come out of her, my people, Babylon. And so it is the choder's principal role to call Yahweh's people home and out of Babylon. That is why it is extended as a yatsa. He will be brought forth to serve. Call perfect, active, sequential, third person, masculine, singular. There's one. Choder. He is a male. He is in the sequence of events, and he is literally going to appear, going to do these things, come from this source, but for a limited period of time. Seems like a long time to me, though. Yeah? By means of, I'm just kidding, actually, it seems like yesterday that we began this. That was 21 years ago. By means of, out of, the stock, the Giza. Just in case you didn't figure out what choder means, God lays it right out there. The choder is going to grow out of the stock, the Giza, the stump, the root from which new growth emerges, the trunk which has been cut down and is yet capable of supporting new shoots of Yishay.
Cool.
Now, Yishay is Dod's dad.
Dod's daddy, yeah.
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 He has a very, very small speaking role. Most everything he said is counterproductive, belligerent, stupid, adds nothing to the conversation. Doe doesn't say, boy, what a great dad I have. Oh, my dad, he taught me all these wonderful things. Yishay is there to symbolize all the problems with human parents and why we're a lot better off with Yahweh as our Heavenly Father. Because all the Psalms and the Proverbs where Dode speaks of his father, he's speaking of Yahweh. Yishay is there because of his name. Yishay is here because of his name. Yishay means to stand out and be noticed. That's the problem of the world today. No one is willing to stand up, stand out, or be noticed. Why? Because you get ripped up, teared down, and crucified when you do those things. You better really make sure that you're prepared, that you know the material, that you understand it better than anybody in your audience, that you can speak of it with conviction, and that you're on God's side. Otherwise, to be a Yitzhak is a very poor decision in today's world. The second reason for the mention of Yitzhak is that all of this, the work of this choder, his effort to call people out for a second exodus through the use of Yitzhak, his coming up from the original rootstock, representing the original rootstock of the olive of Yisrael, which ties them also into that second witness position, is that the essential element of that is something we didn't understand until we were 10 years into this mission. Which is that if you're going to be effective witnessing to the chosen people on behalf of Yahweh, you have to know the most important person in the world. You need to know why Yahweh anointed Dode as the Messiah. You need to know why Yahweh chose him to be shepherd of his people. You need to know why he inspired him with more prophetic insights than anyone else in writing the Mizmor and Mashal. You need to understand why he was the exemplar of how to fight to defend God's people. You need to understand why he was the prime example of what it means to be in the covenant. You have to have an appreciation of how a man who did many things wrong was perfect in God's eyes and was always right. You need to understand that God's coming back with Dowd. He doesn't do anything alone. And the one man he chose to be King of Kings, to be the returning Messiah, to be the defender of his people, to be the ultimate shepherd from now throughout time is Dowd. There is a second coming. It's Dowd. There is a Messiah, and he is returning. It's Dowd. And God makes this perfectly clear. And it is essential to understanding God's timeline, God's purpose, and his continued emphasis on his people. He is not coming back as Jesus. He's sure as hell not coming back to exonerate a Christian church. In fact, the Gentiles will be annihilated upon his return. So, then a choder, a shoot or sucker from the fallen stump, will be extended for a limited period of time to withdraw by means of the rootstock, the giza of Yishe, to stand out and be noticed, to draw attention to the substance of existence. From Yish, to exist and become substantial, to stand up and be noticed. As a netzer, as an observant branch, secondary stem or shoot, which extends from a primary limb. That primary limb is Dowd.
Mm-hmm.
That is from Natsar, to observe, to watch over, to preserve, to closely look after, to focus upon and protect. By means of his roots and that which keeps him anchored, steadfast and nourished. The choder is rooted in the word of Yahweh. He lives to translate and to share insights derived from the word of Yahweh. He does not vary. He is not pulled off course because he is anchored and nourished by the word. That is his base. That is his foundation. That is what keeps him firmly established, such that he will continually bear an abundance of fruit, being productive while encouraging productivity in others. Parah. I cannot tell you how many Yehudim will be part of the remnant that Yahweh will ultimately reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that based upon what Yahweh has said, the overwhelming preponderance of those who are there will be there because they've noticed what we have done. They will have read Yada Yahowah. They will be aware of Yahweh's name, his purpose, his timing, and specifically what he is offering and expects in return. Throughout the prophets, there is a constant reference to Yada Yahowah.
Mm-hmm.
God titled this series of books. We're here to reach you. We're here because God intends to have a harvest, and he wants it to be fruitful. And it is only by sowing the seeds that he has provided and cultivating them that we will encourage others to join us and be part of that harvest.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's just Yashaya 11:1. As we move into 11:2, we're told how this is going to happen. Because, well, quite frankly, there's not a lot of good examples about choders out there. You know, most suckers get trampled down.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, we never hear from Yiche again. So this fellow clearly isn't a Israelite, as we learn from other sources, and so he's going to need a lot of help. So just in case you didn't get the message that what he is doing to liberate God's people is rooted in the original rootstock that was Yisrael and is anchored into the Word of God,
you know.
He's going to help you out here, and he's going to let you know how this otherwise completely unqualified implement was able to play such a role in the calling home of God's people. This is because the Spirit, the Ruach of Yahweh, will settle and remain on him. Now, the Ruach of Yahweh settled and remained on Dod. The first thing we're told about Dod after he was anointed on Yahweh's instructions by Shamuel.
Mm-hmm.
This cannot happen right now to a Jew. Well, it couldn't happen to any Jew prior to Jews beginning to read Yada Yahowah, because there wasn't any Jew that would even mention Yahweh's name. If you don't know Yahweh, if you're not reaching out to him by name, if you do not acknowledge his name, you are not going to be anointed in his spirit. That eliminates all Christians, all Muslims, all Haredim, Orthodox Jews, also progressive and secular Jews. The essential element here is that there are lots of spirits out there, but we're talking about the Ruach of Yahweh. And for that to occur, you must know and accept Yahweh by name. This is because the Spirit of Yahweh will settle upon him. Nuach al. She was placed upon him. She energizes him and restores him. She is in alliance with him, dwelling and residing within him, never departing his abode, while she enriches the association and assures the most favorable outcome for him, enabling him to be composed and to prevail no matter the challenge. It takes a lot to turn a goy into a useful implement. The spirit of providing the capacity to comprehend and teach. And that's the essence of it all. There's only one way to God. Knowledge leading to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find God any other way. Can't find him through faith. Can't find him through religion. Can't find him for stumbling around, groping in the dark. There's only one way. You find Yahweh by reading his words, processing them intelligently so that you come to understand who he is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return. That's it. And the only way for that to occur is for somebody to learn and then teach. For someone to listen and then tell. And so the Spirit is providing the capacity to comprehend and teach. Chakma. Offering the mental aptitude and wisdom to instruct, comprehension and technical expertise to do what is required to impart understanding and to educate. And enabling understanding by making connections to reveal insights. Bana. It is the 1-2 of comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is you have to have a disciplined approach to acquiring and filtering knowledge, information. When you learn how to be discriminating and discerning, pursuing knowledge, and then you can make the connections between the various things that you've discovered and learned, that leads to understanding. And understanding is infinitely superior to knowing, and knowing is infinitely superior to believing. This is the path to God. This is what the Spirit enables the person who is willing to learn from the Torah teaching of God. And enabling understanding by making connections to reveal insights. Facilitating the propensity to ponder and process information by being perceptive and discerning, discriminating and judgmental, making intelligent associations which lead to conceptual comprehension. There are a number of uniquenesses to Yada Yahowah, beyond just the title, to know, to acknowledge, to be familiar with, to understand Yahweh. One of those, of course, is the Amplified translations. We're going through an Amplified translation now. Rather than convey something with 5 words, we'll convey it with 50. Takes a lot more effort, but by conveying everything that God intended by the words that he selected, we go from being unaware to knowing, and from knowing to understanding. It is the journey to God through words that leads us home. The second is that when we go through this process and we have the benefit of spiritual inspiration, we are afforded insights that are often profound, many unheralded. I was telling you, Kirk, just today that I'm translating a passage in Hosea, and a draw drops to the table. It says that just as Adam, Abar, which an Abar has lots of connotations, in this case they have to be all negative, grew resentful, started meddling in the relationship. That as Adam started meddling in the relationship, grew resentful towards the covenant, Bereth. Just as he did that, so has Israel. And that they have therefore been unfaithful and betrayed Yahweh. That's in Hosea. And you're reading that.
Yeah.
Whoa! That means that the covenant was specified to Adam. Even though we're not told about it, it means that God quantified the terms, conditions, and benefits of his covenant, and it only has one, same one he delineated with Abraham in his conversations with Adam. And that Adam somehow grew disgruntled, resentful, wanted to change the agreement. It's a whole different perspective to look at, to understand what happened in the Gan Eden. And then God is comparing that to what Judaism has done to his people, and how Judaism has caused them to betray Yahweh treacherously. This is really a profound insight that you're not going to get any other way than to read and study Yah's words through the inspiration of the Spirit and to see how much more we can learn. Continuing, it's the spirit of advice and counsel. This is the spirit that was so powerful. In fact, one of the meanings of malak is to advise and to counsel. The spirit of advice and counsel, it's etzah, of pertinent directions regarding how to properly respond, providing prudent consultation on the purpose of the proposal, delivering effective mentoring on how to deliberate relevant decisions. That's why we're here. We're laying out for you the instructions that Yahweh provided in such a way that once you come to know what he is offering and understand what he is expecting in return, you're in a position to engage in the covenant, to become immortal, perfected, adopted into God's eternal family, to be enriched and empowered by him, to become what Yehudim means, beloved of Yah. The spirit of advice and counsel, of being emboldened and inspiring. Boy, that is the thing that you find out about God in a hurry. If you're part of God's team, if you're somebody that Yahweh chooses to work through, and he's always working through somebody, God never works alone, ever, under any circumstances. The purpose of creating the universe and authoring life was so that he could enjoy camaraderie, so that he could enjoy the thrill of and the productivity of working together. Father and son, father and daughter. And the people that he chooses to work through are bold. Imagine going to Noah and say, hey, we're going to build a ship. I mean, this ship is going to be like a super tanker. You don't know what a super tanker is, but that's how big it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right out here in the middle of this mountainous region, where the biggest thing you've got is a little stream, we're going to build a ship. Okay. Let's get go.
Sure.
I mean, goodness gracious. Look at Moshe. Hey, talk about being bold. You're being hunted down as a murderer in the most powerful country on earth, and God says, I want you to walk back in there carrying nothing but a shepherd's staff and go and confront Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. You want me to do what?
I can say that.
Those people,
Sure.
The last time I went out and tried to help those people, they nearly had my head for it. And you want me to go back for them with a staff? You do know that I'm 80 years old, don't you? Bold. Listen to anything he says in Devarim. He's articulate. He's bold. There's no one bolder in all of human history than Dowd. He would suffer no enemy of his people, whatever it took. Read his Psalms. He is bold. God likes bold people. He is not for the timid. Being emboldened. And the most inspired voice in human history is his son Dowd. Second probably is Moshe. Third is probably Yahshua.
Yeah.
He wants to inspire. He wants to work with people who are strong. And if they're not strong, he's going to make them strong. Going to give them that inward strength to be strong. And so he provides the spirit of emboldening them and inspiring them. The spirit of knowing and knowledge, Dayath, of recognizing where to look for answers and acquiring the information, being aware of the evidence, being able to discern what is relevant, accurate, fact or fiction. That is based on Yada, to learn, to know, to recognize, to acknowledge. And what is the spirit of knowing and knowledge directed at? So as to respect and revere, to appreciate Yahweh. And that's why we're here. We appreciate Yahweh. We recognize Yahweh by name, by reputation, by testimony, by purpose, by offering, by title. We recognize Yahweh. We appreciate Yahweh. Additionally, as if more was needed, by accepting the offer and responding appropriately, he will be perceptive. But I can tell you, I wasn't as bad as Moshe in accepting this offer. But, the circumstances were really quite different. He wanted, Moshe to go in with a staff and go tackle the most powerful kingdom on earth. He wanted me to be equipped with a pen and to go in and expose and condemn the most vicious religion in human history. The calling
there are parallels.
Calling was different, but there were some parallels. I didn't have the burning crag, the burning top of the mountain, but just had the voice, and I tried the same thing. Yeah, you got the wrong guy. No, come on. Not that mission. Nobody survives that mission. Who were you really? Well, the fact is that I agree. He's proven to me that he is who he said he is, and he's agreed that he'll meet the criterion that I thought was necessary to prevail. This could be a very meaningful use of my life. And I decided to do it 21 years later, 6-7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. Come COVID or shine, well, here we are. By accepting the offer and responding appropriately, he will be perceptive. His acceptance and perceptiveness, his nose for the truth, his willingness to respond and supply answers, to go where the words lead, will distinguish him. With regard to developing a profound admiration and respect for, first and foremost in doing that, you got to know his name. You got to know how to pronounce his name. You have to know what his name means, why his name is important. And for that alone, God could not have used any religious Jew. Religious Jews, in fact, Jews as a whole, have not said God's name for the past 2,005 or 600 years. If you don't know his name, you can't represent him. One of the things you find when you're translating the prophets is that Yahweh's name is everywhere.
All over the place, yeah.
And if you're reading something that wasn't inspired by Yahweh, Yahweh's name is nowhere. Pretty easy to figure out who is speaking for Yahweh and who is not. Now, it's interesting, this term, admiration and respect. I mean, I admire Yahweh. I respect him as creator, as God, as Father, as the one who inspired the Torah and prophets, as the one who liberated his people. But I most certainly do not worship him as a God. I don't worship him at all. I don't pray to him. Never bow down to him. I relate to Yahweh as he's my father. He's my boss. But it's a family business. So he may be my boss, but it's still it's a family business.
Yeah.
And I'm in this business with a lot of other family members. And it's very collegial. Our relationship is friendly. He's not judgmental, not demanding. He's certainly not authoritative. He's work on your own pace. I'll be there when you're there. We're in this together, and I'm here to support the effort. And he constantly comes across as pleased. And when you consider the relative difference in our intellect, it's pretty hard to imagine.
Pretty great to do.
But nonetheless, that is the relationship we have. So when it talks about respect, I respect him in ways that are very different than most people would view that word, because I don't put God on a pedestal. I sense God working in me, through me, even for me. Now, God says a number of places that he's here to help us. Works out really well that way. He's here to lift us up. He's here to empower us. I can't empower him. I can't lift him up. I can't. But I can help, because there's things that he wants done. And the best way to get them done is to have respect for Yahweh. Therefore, it will not be by an appearance or a vision seen with his eyes that he will decide. There will be no burning top of the mountain. The Krog, the term is not bush, but it's the top of the mountain.
It is. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And so there was not going to be a sign. I didn't see a transfiguration. It wasn't a vision, which means it's not a prophetic revelation. So this pretty much eliminates the idea that this could be Yosha, because, well, with Yahweh's Nefesh, he would have seen it all. And only thing that I've seen is God through the words that he inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's more than enough, I will tell you. You can visualize God. You can see Yahweh in all of his glory through the words that he inspired. And that's what I have envisioned, not that of a prophetic revelation. And there's such a huge difference. All of Yahweh's prophets were either Israelites or Yehudim, mostly Yehudim. And Yahweh does not need another prophet. He has said more than we can possibly process. What he needs is a witness, someone who will correctly convey his testimony to his people and help them understand it. Therefore, it will not be by an appearance or a vision, lo, la, mara. It will not be through a visual form that can be seen or any spiritual revelation, miraculous vision, or supernatural phenomenon. This was important because so many of the morons that have gone before that claim to have seen visions, so many of the rabbis that have claimed to see visions, these false messiahs that have claimed to see visions, they're all frauds. If you are dependent on God performing some kind of a miracle for you, you're really not prepared to speak for him. If you can't use your eyes and your mind to study his testimony, come to know him, and be convinced that he has proven his inspiration of those words through his prophets, then quite frankly, you don't deserve a sign. And if you've done it, you don't need a sign. This idea that Paul said, signs and wonders. Paul, God does not try to impress. Yet, the moment somebody says performing miracles, what Benny Hinn with a healing and a dinner and a healing, it's all fake. The only sign you ought to be looking for is an accurate rendering of God's words, them spoken clearly and boldly, sharing insights that can be derived from them on the word that he is going to decide, not some supernatural revelation. The difference is astounding, too, because if I was coming to you and had written these 25, 27 books, depending on which part of the series you count, saying that I'm sharing this with you based upon my own personal revelation from God, there would be no way to prove that it was accurate. But if every word I share, every word I translate, every word I seek to interpret and comprehend is based upon the proven testimony that Yahweh has inspired through his prophets, then you can validate it all. Then you know that I'm speaking for Yahweh, revealing what he conveyed through his prophets so that you can understand it. It gives you the ability, everyone the ability, to verify the veracity of every statement, of every conclusion, of everything we have said from the beginning. Also, it will not be by hearsay, not by rumors or innuendo, not by word of mouth or that which has passed around person to person, or by listening to information which cannot be verified. To question Shama, listening, heard with his ears, that he will make judgments or prove his arguments. No. Not going to listen to a bunch of preaching. I'm most certainly not going to listen to some talking head on a video that claims to have some profound new theory. Those of you who know me, if you send me a video, I am not going to watch it. If you can send something to me that is in writing and say, okay, this is what this person said, I've checked the evidence that seems to hold, what do you think? I'll respond. I think one of the greatest disservices that ever been done is all of these videos that are posted all over social media with talking heads talking about their own personal opinions. And most of them are talking nonsense and inspiring conspirators. We ought not convey hearsay. When rabbis try to justify their position, it's all hearsay. They're quoting other rabbis who weren't there in the first place. The only people that I quote are those that quote Yahweh. Yahweh spoke through his prophets. He spoke through them in first person, although there are occasions where every one of their prophets gets to express their own reaction, their own response to what they're seeing and hearing from God, infusing their humanity, their own conclusions and understanding into the testimony, making it even more vital and real, giving it an element of authenticity that is so enjoyable, sharing their personality along with those insights. But all of them are witnessing precisely what God told them. When we read and recite the words that Yahweh revealed through his prophets, it is as if we were there. We're conveying God's testimony directly from him as he had it written down so long ago. And by the way, it says that he will yakak. He's going to offer advice, seeks to resolve disputes. He's going to make decisions regarding vindication. He's going to be judgmental. He's going to prove his arguments. He will exercise good judgment, washafat. He will decide, judging and adjudicating the matter, arguing to resolve disputes. That is one of the great problems of today. We're taught that being judgmental is wrong. It's against political correctness. Well, I'm telling you, if you're not judgmental, you can't be moral. You can't be intelligent. You can't be just. You can't be fair. You can't be compassionate. You can't know God. It is essential to exercise good judgments, to make decisions based upon evidence and reason. By seeking to be accurate, honest, and forthright, sadak. This must be the driving force of any witness when speaking for Yahweh. Strive to be accurate. Try to be honest. Be forthright. If you know the answer, share the answer. If you don't know it, say, could be any one of these things. I'm going to share all the possibilities with you so that you can decide. With regard to opening the doorway for the discerning. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. The path to God begins with the doorway. That doorway is called Pesach. It's followed by the most important day of the year, Matzah, where our souls are sponged of the fungus of religion, cleaned and perfected so we can be part of God's family. He will provide proof using sound arguments. Now, once again, this cannot be Jesus. We don't know diddly squat as to what he said. That's not Jesus. But even if we go to Yosha, there is a reasonable likelihood that what is recorded in a book written by a preposterous individual, an impostor, Matthew, who was not a disciple. Matthew was probably written by a Pauline advocate around 80 or 90 CE, and 80% of it plagiarizes, almost 90% of it plagiarizes Luke and Marcus, who were both Pauline ploys. But the only things that really make it interesting is that he also found and plagiarized the book that was written by the Ebonites, which were followers of the way, who spoke Hebrew, and wrote down two of Yosha's most important speeches that are only found in this one book because he incorporated them into the book. It's really the only difference between that book and Luke and Mark that he plagiarized. And one of those two things is the Sermon on the Mount. And that's about all we have that appears the least bit credible from him. So to say that he will be known for these arguments, that he's going to be accurate and forthright in his testimony, to say that he is going to provide proof using sound arguments, that can't be Yosha. He didn't come to argue. He didn't come to prove. He didn't come to teach. He came to be the Passover lamb. And it's because he came to be the Passover lamb, and God had already said all he needed to say. We don't have much of anything that he actually said in the language that he spoke it that's been reliably retained. As a matter of fact, I would say we have nothing that he said in Hebrew reliably retained to this day. That is by design. You want to know what God has to say, read the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. God said all he needs to say, including all that needed to be said about the Passover lamb. We do not need the Passover lamb making a sound argument for being the Passover lamb. He will provide proof using sound arguments with everything out in the open, doing so fairly, putting everything on the table, on the level, nothing hidden. That's why we do these translations with the Hebrew words put within the parenthetical so that you can look them up and validate them from yourself. That's why if in amplifying them there's more to the word than we can convey within the sentence, that we'll write paragraphs about it. We'll tell you the word's history, its root, how it's used elsewhere. Everything on the table. Open for your review. On behalf of the sincere who are seeking straightforward answers, Anah, those who are willing to respond, but who need some assistance from a witness with answers to their questions, who is constantly thinking, making such declarations. It's from Anah to respond, to answer. Then he will strike, verbally attacking and disabling. This is an essential aspect of the role of the spiritually inspired choder. He's going to attack. What is he going to attack? Religion, politics, those things that have corrupted Yahweh's name and his message, those people who have led you astray about Yosha as the Passover lamb, Dod as the Messiah and Son of God, that Torah means teaching and not law, that it's Dod who's returning with Yahweh, that the Mikre enable the benefits of the covenant, that the covenant has 5 instructive conditions that we must accept if we want to receive its 5 benefits. He's going to attack anyone and everyone who seeks to corrupt that message, that Yahweh's name is pronounced Yahweh and it is essential. then he will strike, verbally attacking and disabling the material realm with the rod and the staff of his mouth, and thus his voice. And with the spirit of his lips and the resulting language, he will devastate the wicked and the wrong. Being right, correct, and honest will be the belt around his waist, and the trustworthy and reliable nature of his witness, emunah, the integrity and dependability of the individual in the testimony by keeping it real and genuine. That's going to be the band girding him. Well, after a number of symbolic references to events of his time, our time, the prophecy continues by saying, "Then it will come to pass in that day, the root which anchors and nourishes of Yishai to stand out and be noticed, who showed the way to the benefits of the relationship, will stand up, be present and accounted for, approaching as a sign and banner for the family, Anesh." That is what we're sharing with you. That's what, if you go to YadaYah.com, if you're listening to this, go to YadaYah.com, YADAYAH, to know Yah.com. You'll see a bookshelf. Click on any one of them. They're all free. They're all presented in their entirety. Currently about 15,000 pages of translations, commentary, and insights. Read them.
Amazing.
Come to know the benefits of the relationship. They're all standing up there, present and accounted for, in a sign and banner that God himself is lifting up under his name, Yahweh. And he is doing so for the family of God, El, for the people who are related to the Almighty. Through him, even Gentiles will continue to seek, and there have been many. And so therefore, his restful residence will exist as a reward and a source of enrichment, energy, and enlightenment. I guess he's going to be put off to a nice resort someplace, probably given a gold watch, patted on the behind, said, "Hey, good job, kid. now go take a nap." I've got it from here. Joe's going to take over. But it was good.
That works.
That works for me. I've been looking forward to retirement. I love this job, but I have been looking forward to retirement. And it sounds like retirement's going to be cool. So it will have to come to pass in that day. My upright one will once again associate his hand a second time to reacquire, bring back, and redeem the remnant of his family who remain out of Ashur, the northern Iran and Iraq area, from Mitzrayim, lower Egypt, out of Panthros, which would be upper Egypt, from Cush, the Arabian Peninsula, out of Elam, southwestern Iran, from Shinar, Iraq, and Babylon, out of Hamath, Syria, and from the coastlands, the inhabited shores of countries bordered by large bodies of water. Notably, Lebanon, the United States, Canada, Central and South America, Western, Southern, and Northern Europe, Turkey, India, New Zealand, Australia, and Northern and Southern Africa of the sea, of places where Gentiles live. By the way, the upright one, that ain't the choder. The upright one here is Dod, that Yahweh was calling to call his people home. So he will lift up, Nasa, he will bring forth and raise a signal and banner. Now this is God is going to lift up and raise this signal and banner for Gentiles and for their nations. Then he will gather together and remove the strain and scattered of Yisrael. So even though the target audience has always been Yisrael, Yehuda,
Yeah.
The first to listen to this message were Goyim. And even now in the covenant, it's probably an equal number of Goyim and Yehudim. And so it is exactly the way that this has turned out. And that ultimately there will be a gathering together and removing of the strained and scattered of Yisrael, and the dispersed of Yahudah, Jews, he will gather up and obtain from the four extremities of the earth. Well, guess what? That most certainly didn't happen with Yosha. As a matter of fact, with Yosha, the Christian Jesus, when he performed as the Passover lamb, it wasn't very long to Rome destroyed the temple and then came back and dispersed Jews around the world. He had exactly the opposite effect. And so this is a different individual at a different time, and that time is now. So suffice it to say, this was not about Yosha, as so many have been misled to believe. It is, however, about Yahweh's love for his people and his willingness for, quote, a succor, to raise a Nesh sign to bring his people home. Now, in about 60 seconds, we'll stop broadcasting. We'll still be recording. We're going to move into the second of the misconstrued prophecies here. This one is in Yeshayah 42. We're going to begin in Yeshayah 41 and work our way to it. We won't get too far into it before we call it an evening. I'm pleased that I haven't hacked too much. I apologize for the few coughs that I've had this evening, but
no, you're doing great. You're doing
feel
great,
pretty good for a guy that was tested positive for COVID and suffered this prior week. But while we're on the subject of correcting the record, there is another prophecy which is purported to speak of the Pesach Ayal, the Passover lamb. And while it begins in Yeshayah 42, it's what God says before that pronouncement, which indicates that he is speaking of someone else, chastising the useless nature of religion and political leaders, especially among Yehudim, Jews. And Yeshayah, Isaiah, is asking the following question. Who has been informative? Conspicuously reporting from the source, so that we may choose to know, and without turning away, so that we might say, this is right. Indeed, it has been disheartening because there was no one else who made an informative declaration. Been discouraging that there was no one who would even listen. It has been aggravating that there were none willing to hear your words. Kirk, I heard you speak up there. Are we having audio problems at this point, or we're still fine?
No, I think you can still hear me, right?
Okay, yeah, I can. This is a very profound statement, Kirk. I think you read it in preparation for the show. It is something that is so unexpected in the middle of a prophecy. And here it is. It's God says, so who has been informative? Conspicuously reporting. Who has been openly revealing from the source that we may choose to know?
There is no one other than this program, other than this writing, this collection of... Now, this
particularly
is,
when it's spoken by Yeshayah.
Yeah.
Because it's Yeshayah's prophecies that resonate throughout everything we do.
You know, you're right in the middle of the thing, there's Nagad, and that's I was talking to Dee about that. Just I want to say I talked about it. I looked up every word that you've read so far this week, and there's no argument. This is really good. I mean, your presentation is better than what you wrote even. So today I'm just, I don't want to just pat you on the back all the time, but I really want to pat you on the back all the time. This is really good.
Well, we're not patting. Obviously, the choder, that sucker, is got 7 spirits of Yahweh.
But you have help.
And Abraham. And so the only way to say, this guy is really crappy is to say, boy, Yahweh's spirits, not very good.
Give them.
So, even though I'm here to say I've got, more flaws than hairs on my head, the fact of the matter is you can only be so flawed with Yahweh working so diligently to make his nesh achieve the stated purpose. So that has been our goal, though, is to be conspicuously informative.
Yeah.
And, there's no one. I mean, clearly, Moshe acknowledges the role we're playing. Dod acknowledges the role we're playing. Hosea acknowledges the role we're playing.
Everywhere.
Zacharias notices the role we're playing. But it's Yahshua.
Well, he's a big fan of all.
I mean, yes.
Well, this is
he is actually a fan. And you can tell that Yahshua is a fan of this. That's why the entire 11th chapter is on the choder. Is that Yahshua is a fan because he is this enormously intellectual, brilliant and articulate prophet who God has given some of the most profound insights that go through the entire chasm of time to his return. And Dod is looking at all of the magnificent things that Yahweh has revealed to him, and then he gets this crowning moment of his life, and Yahweh, who loves Yahshua and what they've achieved together, invites Yahshua into heaven, and here he is witnessing Yahweh in person in Shamayim, and Yahweh throws open the door, and there's no one there.
Nobody.
Not a single soul. And Yahshua is devastated. Oh, my God. I'm going to get fired for sure. No retirement party for me. There's nobody here. What am I doing? And God says, hey, man, it's all right. The things that I'm revealing through you are ultimately those things that are going to take root and grow and are going to be essential for the ultimate reconciliation between myself and Yisrael. It's just that they're going to be explained and understood at a different time.
The appropriate time. Yeah, the appropriate time.
And to console you, Yahshua, I'm going to show you how this is going to happen. And so Yahshua is excited about this because this devotion he's had to revealing these profound prophecies that Yahweh has revealed through him are taking root and growing in the minds of God's people. And that's why he is so excited about this. It is self-serving, but when you're working for Yah, self-serving is a good thing.
Yeah.
So he's saying, who?
Plus the words,
You, my people, need to ask, who has been informative? Who has been conspicuously reporting from the source, from the very beginning, so that we may choose to know? Yada.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And without turning away, so we might say, this is right. Sadak, correct. Indeed, it has been disheartening that there was no one who made an informative declaration.
Did you catch the word
this
there?
Is wonderful. Now we're getting the message directly from the source. We finally have the opportunity to know. We can validate that this is right. But in all of the time before that, there was no one. Not a single solitary soul who made an informed declaration. It was also discouraging that there was no one who would even listen. It has been aggravating that there were none willing to hear your words. Boy, profound. In your face. These rabbis who claim that they're speaking for God, that they've received these prophecies, they're outright lies. The Jews, the Haredi that believe that their Talmud is inspired by Hashem, it may be inspired by a name, but those names are the names of rabbis.
They're not Yahweh. No.
It is not Yahweh. Our Creator had consistently revealed himself through his people, turning to the best of them and making them prophets. And yet over the long chasm of time, not one Yehud Jew was willing to listen to God after Malachi. He was the last of them. Not a single Israelite could be found to report what Yahweh has said. You can't report what Yahweh has said unless you listen to him. True then, it's true today. Israel's religious and political leaders had become blind mutes, as dysfunctional as they were annoying. If you wonder why Yahweh stooped to using a goy, asking a Gentile to study his testimony and share his message with his people, now you know. If you're a Jew, it should be disgusting. But at least Yahweh didn't give up on you.
Yeah.
He was willing to work through a goy to reach his people. That's how desperate he was to speak to them. Yahweh explained. Initially, for Zion, which means the signs that are posted along the way, there was a lack of awareness. So on behalf of Jerusalem, I wanted to offer a herald, an ordinary person, to proclaim the news.
Bizarre. Yeah.
Now, I can definitely tell you that of all people, Yosha, Jesus, was not a Bashar. Matter of fact, Paul, in true Gnostic fashion, made a religion out of demeaning Bashar, which is also the Hebrew word for the flesh. Flesh bad, according to Pauline Christianity. No, flesh not bad, according to God. He's using flesh and blood, an ordinary human, to herald his message. Bashar's primary meaning is to herald, to convey the news, to report what you have witnessed. So truthfully, this is for Zion. And for Zion, there was a lack of awareness. So on behalf of Jerusalem, God speaking, I wanted to offer a Bashar. I chose to speak through an ordinary person, proclaim the news. A Bashar is one of the 6 or 7 titles that Yahweh uses to speak of this individual. Bashar, witness, Malak, messenger, Nakar and Nakri, my observant foreigner or just observant foreigner, choder, sucker, Zeroah
is
another one who sows the seeds. And the other is Yada, one who knows and understands. In this particular case, Yahshua has moved from choder to Bashar. Bashar is another one of those delightful terms because it is both remarkably profound and a pejorative. Just like sucker, pejorative, but yet really profound because the sucker is what grows from the fallen stump of the tree from the rootstock. And basar means just ordinary fella. But it also is a herald, a messenger, someone conveying the good news. So it's these kinds of terms that root Yahweh's testimony in such a way that if you're in that role, you get to see the humor of it all. Okay, you are a goy after all. You know, you get to see that you didn't win this by being super. You won it by default. You got this job by default. No one else. There was no competition. Okay, you came in first, but there was no second. So nobody else in line. You were the only one that showed up. You get the participation trophy. And it says, okay, title is sucker. Ordinary dude. So you got to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But isn't that the way of Yahweh? I'm going to work with a broken down 80-year-old shepherd with a staff to take on the most powerful nation on earth, and we're going to prevail. I'm going to have another old guy build an ark. We're going to save the animals. I'm going to have the youngest son who's out there tending sheep in Bethlehem, and he's going to become the most extraordinary prophet in the history of humankind, the King of Kings. Okay. That's how God works. A herald, an ordinary person to proclaim the news. Yeshayah 41:27. It is always Yah's preferences to work through his people, but sometimes, through no fault of his own, his desires are thwarted. Sometimes it's tough being God. And this time, rather than a Nabi, prophet, he would use a Bashar, herald, ordinary fellow, tasked with an extraordinary mission as a witness. This is Yeshayah, Isaiah 41:28. We'll end here and pick it up next week. But when I looked, this is Yahweh speaking, there was not a single individual. Wa ein ish. There was nobody, not a soul. Not one among them who would provide thoughtful guidance, who was willing to convey rational advice, inspired thoughts, valuable directions, or considered counsel, nor even respond by speaking when I ask them.
Wow.
That suggests that that the choder Bashar was not the first person that God asked.
I missed that. I missed the depth of that last night.
Somebody out there.
Well, kick yourself now, pal.
Yeah. Said no. Once again, there was no line. There was no second place.
But he asked around.
He did ask around. Hey, you kid. You're the one carrying the 91st Psalm around in your pocket.
Yeah, try him. Yeah. Okay, sure.
How about you?
Okay.
Okay. Who would have known? But it does say that for a very long period of time,
yes,
God found no one willing to listen to him. The Haredim, the first rabbinical Jews, the Sadducees, the Pharisees before them, the Maccabees, the Baal and Asherah worshiping Jews, those who preferred the golden calf. They led so many people astray. There was no one willing to listen. And the last was Malachi, that was willing to listen directly to Yahweh and convey what he had to say, that Yahweh could speak through. And he looked, and there wasn't even an ordinary fellow. He asked, and no one would say yes. And so finally, he would convey his message through Yada Yahowah. And the Yada Yahowah series was born, this program to draw your attention to it, those books that provide, now 15,000 pages of translations, commentary, and insights, all of which provide the information you need to know to engage in a relationship with Yahweh, to come to know him, understand what he is offering, and comprehend what you need to do to capitalize on his offer. That is why we're here. And we will continue with Yahweh as he is inspired by Yahweh to tell you that this is your opportunity. Listen, read, invest the time. God's not going to make it easy. There is no short version. But the truth is liberating. It's uplifting. It's inspiring. It is enlightening. It is empowering. It is enriching. God's message is for you, and it is the greatest journey you will ever embark on. So, Kirk, delighted that we were able to deliver the program under these circumstances. Yeah. Thank you, Seven Spirits, for working overtime. Thank you for the work you did last week with Dee. She is a very bright lady and a sweetheart.
She is indeed.
And Leah and Jackie and Molly and others are working right now on a timeline that I think will be a great addition to the site and to our desire to teach those who would listen the word and message of Yahweh. So we look forward to being with you next week. We'll make it through this chapter. I don't know when we'll turn to the next one. I guess I'm delighted, Kirk, that it is now 21 years into this relationship that I'm finally going back and retranslating Hosea. Because Hosea was the first book that I translated.
Really?
First chapter that I wrote was on translations. My first attempt at translations, and the first chapters I wrote was in Hosea. And I have not retranslated, even with all the edits that I've done. I've never gone back and actually retranslated it. This is the first time now in 20 years. I would not have been prepared for what we have encountered. There is, as intense as Yahweh is, and how rich his vocabulary is, has as much intellect and emotion is conveyed in Dode's Mizmor. This is like taking 7 fire hoses all at once. Virtually every statement is a showstopper. And so we'll get to Hosea and what he had to say, and how profoundly important it is to our lives today, and to the calling of God's people home, and for Jews to understand just how much God despises Judaism, and how essential it is for you to break free of the religion that has defined your people so that you can engage in a relationship with Yahweh. So we'll get to that over the next few weeks, and I thank you, Kirk, and we
Pleasure.
look forward to being with you here this time next week. May Yah bless you all. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.